Well, thanks for having me here. Never been to Brussels more than a couple of hours before, and now I've been here for 3 days, and I love it. I even had the mandatory moule frite last night, which must be the most unhealthy dish there had ever been. So it's been a great, I had a great time. And we've been invited here to talk about how we in Sweden and Scandinavia in general maybe addresses the questions of challenges of future. Basically, how to make young kids more interested in school and in education and lessons and learning, feeling the competition from other things like internet and so on. So that's basically what I'm supposed to be talking to you about. Do you think this clicker will work now? Yes, it does. So, perfect. And as you just heard, I've been working a lot with innovation in education, basically around digitalization, but also in different learning methods and even school architecture and so on. One of my latest things that I did being in school was that I started Sweden's first one-to-one upper secondary school, meaning that every kid had their own computer and everything was based around the internet. And after that, as you just heard, I worked a lot with Apple education in Sweden, and now these days I'm more like a free spirit, you might say. So, but let's start off with bragging about Scandinavia, shouldn't we? Are there any Scandinavians here? Oh yes, and we love ourselves, don't we? Scandinavia almost doesn't exist from a mathematical point of view. It's only 0.3% of the world's population, which basically is nothing. So you might say no one is living there at the end of the Russian area. And if you haven't been there, please do go there. It's super beautiful, especially this time of year. And people are super friendly, handsome, polite, and we do a lot of wonderful stuff. You can go skiing, swimming, you can live perfect, wonderful lives. So it's a wonderful, wonderful part of the world. But apart from that, we're also famous for a lot of things. Companies, brands, inventions, patents and stuff like that. We're even good at sports, stuff like that. So as you can see from these pictures, for being just 0.3% of the population of the world, we've been immensely successful. Immensely successful. Much, much more than Belgians, for instance. So how come? I mean, we talk languages that nobody else speaks. We're a bit strange, shy, and also it's a bit tough to get there because we're at the end of the world. And yet you see things all over the world that comes from Scandinavia. This picture is just a couple of minutes old. It's from the toilets of Bozar, Swedish paper. So we're basically everywhere. How come? 0.3% of the world's population and yet so successful. Well, the answers are a lot, of course, and I'm trying to put them down for you. I've been talking a lot speaking in States, especially on education conferences, and they always instruct me to talk about the Scandinavian Miracle, so I keep on saying that. And it's not just an opinion, it's true, it's fact, that if you look at statistics from just about anywhere, you can see that what I'm saying is not something that Donald Trump would do, but it's actually true facts. For instance, just a couple of months ago, they summed up the countries that were most likely to be successful. And, well, we're doing pretty well with Scandinavians, aren't we? We will have a nice future, this lists are indicating. And also, if we keep on going, and we will, trust me, if you see the number of countries that are actually real democracies, well, we're doing pretty well in Scandinavia, aren't we? We're good at that. And also, we're not only democratic, we're also super free. It's very, very free to live in Scandinavia from a political point of view. Also good at sustainability, for instance, when it comes to food, and it's also very safe. You don't have to be afraid. Brussels is doing rather well, but anyway, Stockholm is much, much, much better. And it keeps on going. I made a list, and they are super long. I will bore you a couple of more minutes with this because I'm so proud of my region. But we're considered to be one of the most creative countries in the world, most patents per capita in the world, most ed tech startups and tech startups. We're very low at crime rates, often get high ranks when it comes to leadership. Don't look bored, this is good stuff. Strong economies, also being a great place for being old, great place for being kids, great place for being parents, super good place for divorcing, stuff like that. So we're doing pretty well. And it just keeps on coming. One of the fun things is that Sweden and Norway are one of the best countries in the world in choir singing. I don't know why. That is interesting. But music in general is one of our strong sides, not just ABBA, but a lot of other stuff like that. And AHA, Morten Harket is one of the best singers God ever made. So this is one of the best things that I love to do while I'm out lecturing, bragging, boasting about Scandinavia. But most interesting enough is, of course, to try to dig into the question of how come. 0.3% of the world's population, how can we be so prosperous and so on? And the key is equality. So if you dig down in statistics, you can see that from a different kind of angles, it's always around equality that we have been really good at in these countries. No matter how which kind of angle you put at it, we're always good at being equal, and you can see also for countries that are not performing as well as that. So, for instance, social mobility and child deaths and obesity and stuff like that. So, it seems to be that we have found one of the important keys to how to be successful, and that has to be, and that is to avoid inequality in a lot of different ways, not just from economic point of view, but also between gender and so on. So, feels rather good to be Scandinavian, doesn't it? You should see the Scandinavians in front here. They are a bit red on their cheeks and blank in their eyes. You're almost crying. So that's a fun thing to do. But how did we do it? That's maybe more interesting in just showing numbers. The super short version is just to say, well, it's a Scandinavian thing, but that's not much to bring home. So the short version is actually what I call the three cornerstones of how Scandinavia have done it. We have been very good historically to balance what's good for everyone, the common good, with what's good for individuals, and also with some kind of dream, what we are striving for, welfare society, green society, or whatever. So there has been a balance between that, while other countries in history and these days are perhaps more focusing on one of these things, what's good for the individual or what's good for society only. The more longer version is that what I call the Nordic Four, is that we have done four things really well. First of all, being good at being open all the time, which probably is because we are 0.3% of the world's population. That's why we keep on being open for changes. People sometimes say that Swedes are the most modern people in the world. Sometimes Danes say that, I don't know, but let's call it a tie. But that is because we are living in a corner of the world where very few people are. We have to be good at English. We have to be open to change. Otherwise, we're out of the market. That's why we're also interested in exporting stuff all the time. But also, that's one of the key factors that we have been early adopters when it comes to technology, for instance, internet and so on. And also being flexible, not to stick to old solutions, but be open to rapid changes has been a good thing. And like it or not, most of the Scandinavian countries throughout the last couple of 60, 70 years in a way, have been pretty good in transferring money from wealthy people to not so wealthy people, some kind of balance, using taxes as a tool and so on. It's my wife, by the way, isn't she beautiful? No reason to be there, but it was an empty place on the screen, so I put her on there. Also, leadership has been a tool for Scandinavian countries, a kind of democratic approach to leadership, saying that people should be on board all the time, constant meetings, doing research and so on, not to rush into things. That has been one of the important things in Scandinavian leadership style. But also, closest to my heart, of course, the fourth thing that people constantly are mentioning when it comes to the factors behind Scandinavian success is our educational systems. All of the countries in Scandinavia were early with having schools at all in the 1840s. Germany was, of course, first, but I think Sweden was number 2 or something like that. But not just having school systems. Of course, the different countries in Scandinavia have their different schools, but there are some factors that are coming back all the time when you look at how Scandinavians have done their or designed their education. For one of these things are the love of teamwork, doing things together, not working as an individual, but working in groups. That seems to have been one of the favorite things. This is mostly true from 70s and onwards, I'd say. Also challenge-based learning, so formulating a problem and then go try to find the answer, just rather than just hammering facts into the heads of the children. Liking the cross-curricular angle, not just studying one subject at a time, but trying to do work in projects and so on. Also a very democratic way to design schools. The kids have a lot of rights in school, being listened to, and having different groups deciding what food to eat and what to do, whatever. Sometimes bad, but sometimes not bad at all. Also, of course, very equal. Been also early adopters in technology and ICT. And all of the Scandinavian schools are, from an international angle anyway, have been investing a lot of money in creativity, subjects working with drama, art, music, and so on, theater, which has been good. Even outside school, having music schools for free, you can rent a guitar for free, and you can have it for so the governments have invested a lot in kids' creativity and art and so on. So that's some of the things that are special about the education in Scandinavia. But that's history. We're now in 2018. Of course, there's a lot of things going on. The success has been based on things happening in the last couple of 100 years. But facing forward, a lot of problems have been arising. So there's a huge debates in the Scandinavian countries right now, especially I'd say in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden about how to deal with education further on. And one of the troubles, of course, is internet and technology. It seems like the kids are a little bit less interested in education and going to school than before. And also the PISA is one of the factors behind this confusion and disillusionment, I'd say, because everybody working in education knows that there's a lot of things that you have to do in education, but still a lot of the debate are only focusing on results in a specific way. So that's troublesome. I'd say that there are mainly 2 different roads that countries around the world internationally have chosen to take facing forward. Either dealing with stuff you always have been doing, so you do it the old way. So do it even more, or even harder, even more tests, even more control, even tougher, banning internet, banning our mobile phones and so on, controlling teachers even more, go digging deeper into how to control tougher management and so on, in perhaps the hope of getting control over school and education again. While on the other side of the ring, we have countries and school systems that are perhaps a bit more interested in rethinking, redoing, testing new stuff, be more interested and open to technology, perhaps being more interested in globalization, other types, other ways to assess, and so on. And normally these things are interacting a little bit. But basically those are the 2 main roads that we see. And Sweden are trying to be, of course, as Swedes always are, and Scandinavians in general, we're trying to do a little bit of both, not to disturb anyone. So a little bit old school, a little bit new school. But focusing on Sweden for a short while, the laws that are regulating what should be done in school, there are basically 7 things that a principal or a teacher must do. not the curriculum, but the school in itself. So the school law in Sweden is rather obvious in what's going on. And of course, the basic thing is to make sure that the kids learn stuff. That's number one. But apart from that, in several decades now, it has been a law, not just a good thing, but it's you must do this as being employed in school. You must make sure that the kids are being more creative. You must make sure that they are becoming more democratic in their approach and so on. So that's quite an interesting things that we have been doing. And also what people can see in education in school right now is that a lot of other things in society has changed rapidly, like how we are communicating with each other and how we are transporting ourselves, how we book hotels, how we interact with each other, how we pay, and so on. So things are moving really, really fast. But and say for example the music industry. You all remember that when the CD record came and so on. Some of you were around in the 1860s maybe. So you remember when the gramophone came in the first place. So the really revolution was iTunes, when music were suddenly easy to access. You remember the old days, right? When you had to go to a record shop to buy Roxy Music albums. And when you went there, you can actually get their reply. Was sold out. That's say if you talk to a 12-year-old today, logging into Spotify and realize that the new Justin Bieber album is out. So you have to wait a couple of minutes before it turns up again. That doesn't happen on Spotify. You always have it. So of course there's been a revolution. But what has education and schools been doing during these years? And what is the equivalent of Spotify for education? I mean, we are still building schools that look pretty much the same. The curriculums are pretty much the same. The way we work is pretty much the same. We assess pretty much the same, and so on. But how could it be? That's a real hot topic right now for a lot of societies around the world. And I'd say the Scandinavian countries are really onto these things right now. So one of the crucial questions is that how should it be how should it feel when you are in school, in education? I think that is one of the reasons. One of the reasons for that is the lessons learned from social media and that industry connected to that, because kids of today are more used to have their needs immediately fulfilled. Everything is more fun, more easy, apart from education. So is it something that we can interact with? Is it something we can use? Some metaphors, some approaches? And of course it is. And getting back to the question I got coming on stage here, it's fun and it's nice to see how educators in the Scandinavian countries these days are moving back to the really basic question: why are we even having schools? What's the purpose of having them? Not just taking for granted that we have them, but to try to move back to one of the central discussions, and try to perhaps reinvent the greater good question. 1950s, we knew what the greater good was. That was building a welfare society, building homes, infrastructure, and so on. But what is the greater good these days? People are a bit confused. And as I mentioned earlier, you could address these questions in two different ways: just to sit down and wait and to react, or you can actually try to shape things. And interesting schools in Sweden and Denmark and Norway are doing really interesting stuff these days. I'd say that two major things are going on in the Scandinavian education systems for the moment, and that is a rather heavily digitalization and also a new focus on innovation. And now we'll be wrapping this keynote speech up with trying to put a little bit of focus on that. I won't bore you with this. The statistics of how fantastic we are is much more interesting. But anyway, this is what's going on in a lot of schools around the Scandinavian countries right now. Not instead of traditional schools or traditional way of doing things, but it comes more and more into education, trying to use tools and things that hasn't been there. So it's really interesting to see how a lot of teachers are embracing new things. Of course, there are conservatives around the school world as well, but I'd say surprisingly a lot of people are participating in workshops and conferences and whatever, trying to use the new tools. Digital assessment is super hot, for instance, in Sweden, not going to the national test and use paper and pen, but to do stuff. But not just big national tests, but all tests. There are tools right now that you can actually assess handwritten writing. So it's not just A, B, and C questionnaires, but actually to be able to read. Also text-to-speech, so you can actually translate and transform the machines that can listen to what you're saying and get it in writing and the opposite ways. And of course, having mobility in classroom with iPads and so on has been going on for a long time. But also things that are coming right now in strong force is the use of big data, artificial intelligence, gathering data from what the students are doing and when they have been performing, and giving assignments and individual design of the students' everyday life, depending on who you are, what you have done before, what time it is during daytime, what teacher you have, and so on. So actually using the technology that is here right now. This is a true revolution. Not moving super fast, but fast, definitely. And I'd like to stress the fact that there's a myth about this, saying that only the young teachers are embracing this. That's not my experience at all. I'd say good teachers are embracing the new technology. Teachers and principals that are interested in the future and interested in doing the best things for the kids, they are always on the front line, while more conservative teachers, my experience is that they are a bit more hesitant maybe than otherwise. So it's not an age thing at all. And the second one, what I will call a kind of revolution going on in the Scandinavian countries right now in education, is the new focus on innovation. And I say especially, this is not just for schools. I've been working a lot with the public Swedish government. They're the ones that are actually employing public bosses, you might say. I don't know the translation of that, but people that are running museums, people that are running public insurance companies and so on. They are focusing heavily on innovation these days, but also, of course, principals in public schools. In the old days, you just followed, you had a script that you should do, or have there been a school law and the curriculum, and that's what you did. And right now, the bosses are telling them to, well, of course you should follow the law, but we also want you to invent your own business. We want you to say to us what you want to do. So that's a kind of a shift in mentality, not going to work doing what you are supposed to do, but also going to work reshaping your work, which is tough, of course. And that, I've been working a lot with Apple, of course, but also in the fast-moving technology companies in the States. And what you can say whatever you want about them, but from an employer's point of view, they are super good at taking care of talents, finding talents, making them thrive and have a good time at work, so they can be good innovators. And I'd say that public employers have a lot to learn from, for instance, Google or Amazon, because they know a couple of things about that. Say Apple, for instance, and Google, they are always focusing on the three key factors for being an innovative organization, not just hoping for it to happen, but to actually have a strategy for it, building structures for it, and to breed a culture where innovation is rewarded. Yet again, not hoping for having innovative individuals, but you can actually make things happen. So working with mainly Google the last couple of years, and also for a Swedish government organization for innovations in public sector for a couple of years now, I've wrapped up the 12 biggest problems for being an innovative organization, thinking of you here today, because this is valid for just about any, I'd say, public organization. And the other side, say Amazon, for instance, they are good at these things. This is how they have been addressing it. But I think for a general school, for a general teacher, they might say, you should look out for having too little time for a reflection. I think a lot of teachers, if you are, have been or no teachers, that's one of the things they don't have. It's always much to do, and tests and so on. But that's bad for innovation. Good for innovation is space, like at Google when you have 20% of the working time free, when you can do whatever you want, as long as it has got to do with work. But also being good at having networks. A lot of schools don't have that. You just go to work and you meet the people you normally are meeting. You go into conferences that you normally go to, and so on. But also being afraid of mistakes. For being a teacher or a principal, you're so focused on not doing mistakes. It's a part of a job to know things. I mean, that's what education is all about. But to give things a chance, to try new stuff, is not a part of the culture, basically. But also not to understand the potential of digitalization. That's one of the key factors that are making you become less innovative. We don't have time to go through all this. But it's interesting to see that a lot of things in education are bad for innovation. A lot of structures that are in schools, and I say in a lot of public employers' situation, is bad for innovation. So that's why Swedish, and I think Norway also doing this from a public employer's point of view, are working much more now with making sure that heads of schools and museum bosses and so on are being better in dealing with how to be a more innovative organization. Just because things are happening so fast, so just popping up to work and doing what you always do is not good enough anymore. And as a final word, everybody here has been reading La Divina Commedia, of course. On the other hand, you might have seen the movie Seven with Brad Pitt, which is the light version of it all. The final words of the Divina Commedia is a good thing in this sense as well. What makes things go and what makes things work is actually you should love what you're doing. And that's also one of the problems, I'd say, in a lot of Scandinavian schools. They don't feel loved, teachers, I'd say. And principals, they don't feel loved from their bosses. It's just a lot about going to work, feeling pressure, underpaid and so on. There's too little passion for being an innovative, modern, open-minded person. There's a lot of things to do there for the ones controlling organizations these days, trying to make them a bit more cheerful, giving more space, more moving decisions downward in the organization. That it's interesting that Dante knew this, and we are a bit bad about that. My time is out, actually, and I would be happy to answer a couple of questions from your specific perspective, having a person from Scandinavia here into schools. Do you recognize the list before? People working in the museum sector, for instance, too little time, always the same networks and so on. People are nodding their heads. Somebody that's got completely different experience? No. Plenty of time. Plenty of love. We can make all of the decisions ourselves.
I have
Hello.
one question. I'm Thomas from the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. Thank you. That's always nice to see it from an education point of view, because we're always among museum specialists and so on. So when we see the value of education that you've shown in the PowerPoint, I think that's exactly the same in museum. And I think that's the reason why in Montreal we want to change the museum into a school. But first of all, if we compare, we have teachers, we have educators, or we have curators, we have directors, principals, and so on. Which one is more advanced? The museum should take example from the schools, or the school should take examples from the museum?
Well, I wouldn't say that there's a competition and a winner here, but rather exactly what you are doing here is exactly the right way to go, to look what your other museums are doing, but also take a look at what people are doing in different areas. What is the car industry doing? What is school doing? What is medicine doing? That's a smart thing for being an innovative organization in 2018. So not trying to stick to just the old going to the same conference all the time maybe, or having the same Facebook group that you're discussing things with, trying to find other areas to interact with.
Any other questions?
What I think about museums in general, I love it. In Sweden, it's a special thing. Museums are free, so you don't pay for going to them, most of them anyway. So that's a good thing, of course. So I go into a lot of museums with my kids all the time, and also art museums and so on. But it's a strange thing that one of the major things that I like about museums is that it's finally a place that is quiet, which is in modern times not very common. So it's like in the old days when you go into churches just to have a couple of hours on your own. So I think that could be a specific thing to bring with you. But I'm an art lover, so I go a lot to Modern Museum in Stockholm, for instance. That's fun. Yes.
Now, sorry.
Great.
So, I'm coming from Helsinki, Finland. Thank you for your presentation. I'm representing Design Museum in Helsinki. And I have maybe the funny story, and also kind of how the education and the museum are linked to each other in the field of education. My son is 7 years old and is going to school next autumn. Finland has just recently changed the curriculum. That's great with the freedom because of the result of the PISA, and we are going to the direction that we use this kind of a phenomena in our curriculum, which means that the students go to the school and they don't have much homeworks. They don't. It's more project-based, and it's phenomenon. Of course, the parents are a bit terrified, like, oh my God, are they going to learn reading and so on? And I've been working in the Museum of Design since 2009, and what I have seen in the education department, how much it is paced already, this kind of a design practice, and using this kind of methods. Yesterday, someone was mentioning Jacques Rancière, the philosopher who is kind of a theory also on that. And to me, how I see it, I think the museum can also teach a lot education sector what museums are doing in the field of education. So my message to the parents who have been worrying like, oh, it's so totally new for all of us, and we have public schools, and the schools are changing it in the different rhythms. But my answer has been that what I've seen in museum education programs and how the children has been so inspired about the workshops that we have been organizing. So I'm like very curious to see that, to see how the kids, and what I have heard until now that the kids likes it a lot, because I think the school needs to change somehow.
I'd say the Finnish example is interesting from this point of view. I mean, Finland is one of the best countries in the world from a PISA perspective, and still you're reshaping the schools. I mean, you shouldn't do anything. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. But you're one of the best in the world, and still you're doing a dramatic change in your school structure right now. And that is truly innovative. And of course, a lot of parents are being afraid, and that's just because there's a strong sense among parents that don't change anything. If the last day at school isn't the same as when you were 8 years old, there's something wrong. Have you got no homework this week? How can you learn? So, anyway.
Okay, I see.
Thanks.
Yes, sorry. A very quick question in 2 words.
Sorry,
yes.
Hi, I'm Marta. I'm head of education at the Van Gogh Museum. I really liked what you said about that leaders in education and schools should be innovative and open to make mistakes. What we experience a lot is that we try to collaborate with schools to do new things, but the people who make decisions at schools see us still as a traditional organization. You go to a museum to gain knowledge. It's like sending. What could we do to make a shift to collaborate differently and make also museums like open learning spaces where things could go wrong?
Well, but a tricky question to answer in a short way. But as I just mentioned, I think the key factor here being more innovative is trying to make sure that the ones leading the organizations are working in a innovative way. Otherwise, you will always bang your head to the wall in all structures and what we are usually used to do. So that's why it's interesting to see that the governments are actually changing the way that they are controlling their own bosses. So asking for things. A lot of cities in Sweden, for instance, that when they are recruiting principals these days, it's not just a wish. They demand them to work in a different. We wanted to reshape your organization in the coming 5 years, for instance, which is a new way of addressing leadership.
Well,
Okay.
you talk a lot about love as well.
Yeah.
So the good news is that we love our collection, we love our people, the people who come to see them.
Yeah.
And the bad news is that we have no money for innovation. So probably, I mean, we can find solution with the people and with the community. So this has been the question, and asking question, which is very important. So thank you very much, Hans.
Thank you.
Very
Nice
inspiring
being here.
to have you here
Thanks.
among us and to have a new perspective and to open mind for us. So great, and we
Thanks
can
for being here.
applaud
Thank you.
Hans.